Curtis Priest, a Forbes contributor, founder of multi-award-winning digital agency Pixelcar. Anyway, I'll stop boring you guys with my annoying voice and I'll let someone who's a lot more experienced take it away.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it. It's good to be here and speak with all you young, fine folks with bright futures ahead of you. Just give me a quick thumbs up if you can all hear me fine. Everyone can hear me good. All right, perfect. So as Nick said, my name is Curtis Priest. I am a longtime business owner and entrepreneur. Been through the trenches. My company's Pixelcar Inc. We're a digital advertising agency. I started the company in 1998 out of my parents' basement just after I graduated high school, actually. So I have a fair bit of experience dealing with not just my own business and my own business experience, but we do advertising and digital products for other businesses. So I've also had the great pleasure of meeting hundreds, if not thousands, of other business owners and entrepreneurs and people who have made a big difference in the world. I also have the pleasure of serving as a board of director member on the regional board for the Entrepreneurs Organization Canada. EO is a global organization, it's about 15, 16,000 members worldwide. There's a chapter in every major city. I've had the pleasure of being the president of the Toronto chapter, and I now serve on the Canadian regional board. So it's given me an interesting insight into a pretty wide range of businesses, business models, people who run businesses and what it takes to become successful, and also, what it takes to, fight through the peaks and valleys, as there's a lot of peaks and valleys that come with this type of with this line of work. So I figured I'd just basically talk about some of the things that I've learned over the 23 years that I've been doing this in business. I certainly didn't start as a sort of an entrepreneur. That wasn't necessarily the mindset that I went into this with. I had some things that I was good at doing, and I figured if I did them for people and they would pay me money, then that would be a better way of making a living than working for somebody. I've always sort of figured I was somewhat unemployable. I don't know if I could ever actually have a boss, so I figured if I was my own boss, then that would be great. And that was a really somewhat ignorant way of looking at business, because what I find with me, how I started, and what I find with a lot of people that go into business for themselves, they're not actually entrepreneurs. They're just business owners. They're people who essentially have bought themselves a job or made themselves a job to have a whole bunch of different bosses for different people, as opposed to just having the one boss that you have to answer to. So, my own personal struggle was on this idea that I was, I had to do everything and everything was going to be, perfect if I was the one to do it, and no one could do it better than me. And so I would, work really hard, and I'd stay up late, and I'd work crazy hours, and I'd get stuff done, and I'd sell stuff to people. And that was great, but I basically had built myself a job. And I find that this is a common story. It's a common thread that I hear a lot with business owners. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and tie some of my experiences. And I know we don't have a ton of time here today, so I'm not going to dwell on some of these little details. But I'm going to point in the direction of some books that I personally found very helpful. And I also think will, give you a lot more flavor and some information to some of the things that I'm going to talk about over the next 10, 15 minutes. And the first one really, I think that every business owner needs to start with is the E-Myth. You may have already read it, and if you have, good for you. But it really is this idea that there's sort of three types of entrepreneurs. There's the entrepreneur, the actual person who starts a business and, creates a mission and builds a team and solves a problem in the world and then scales it. But then there's the technician entrepreneur, which is how I started, which is the person who's basically a laborer, and you do a job for people and you do it under your own banner. And then there's the manager entrepreneur, who's the person who kind of leads a team, but really it's just about, leading a team and getting stuff done, not necessarily scaling a business. The other one I recommend is Good to Great. Obviously, it's for much, much larger Fortune 500 businesses, but it was one of the first, these were the first two business books that I read, actually introduced to me by my wife, who's your next speaker. She's a business coach and she's a phenomenal person. And it really, this was the sort of core mindset switch that I needed to switch from being that sort of technician labor entrepreneur into actually building a company that was sustainable, and had a broader impact on the world. And so over the 23 years of doing business, I've dealt with some of the most successful business owners on the planet. Some of our clients are billionaires, and they're building infrastructure and buildings, and they're building massive companies, selling lots of stuff to lots of people. But I think there's this algorithm, there's this formula that I've discovered that they all have. And the first one is a vision. They all have this really big vision of, they can see in their head, they can paint a picture of exactly what it is that they're going to build, and not necessarily yet how they're going to get there, but they can see what it's going to be. It's a goal. It's just a big, it's a fancy word for saying a goal, but it's very high fidelity. Like it's tangible. They can see it in their own mind. The next one is discipline. Their ability to really dig down and grit through and deal with those peaks and valleys, and find the internal fortitude to actually go through some of the hard times, because there will be a lot of hard times. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. And the last one is a element of being able to manage risk. Now I'm going to talk about that in a second, but ultimately, if you have vision, discipline, and risk, there's a very good chance that you're going to have success, and some at different times throughout the stage. Your vision typically starts at the beginning. The discipline is the hustle to get through. The risk is things are going to come at you, and you're going to have to figure out how to deal with them. And do you have the willingness to deal with the potential downsides in exchange for getting an upside? And those people tend to be the most successful that I've met. A couple books I recommend for vision. Vivid Vision by a friend of mine, Cameron Harold, is probably the best. If you only have one book to read on creating a vision, I would say pick this one up. In terms of discipline and building an internal fortitude for yourself, hands down, Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life is by far the best book on that. It really will. I think it'll, at least for me, it really changed the way that I kind of look at how to get through things. And then the element on risk. So here's an interesting thing. Most people think that entrepreneurs are risk takers, crazy, jump off a cliff and build a plane, on your way down. And that there's an element of truth to that, but I don't think that's actually true. I think they're optimists. I don't think that entrepreneurs necessarily perceive risk in the same way that a normal sort of, person who goes and gets a job perceives risk. They don't necessarily think that what they're doing is risky. They're optimistic about what they're doing. So their willingness to accept what the world sees as risky seems high, but to them it's actually not necessarily high. And obviously, none of these are hard and fast rules. None of this is gospel or dogma. These are just some of the lessons that I've learned over the years I've been doing this. Take them for what you will. If there's a one nugget in here kind of thing is something that we like to say, then that's great. But I definitely, if you look at this as an aggregate, I think a lot of these things are true. And one of the ways that entrepreneurs mitigate risk is, and I go back to the term entrepreneur in terms of a person building a business as opposed to a person who's a laborer doing a job, is starting small and scaling up in increments. So if you go and you build a big company and you raise a bunch of money and you hire a big team of people and you go and build something for the world, and it turns out no one wants it, or you didn't sell it right, or you didn't know how to market it, you wasted a lot of money and time and possibly gone bankrupt. In fact, one of the biggest reasons that funded startups go bankrupt is they run out of money. And one of the reasons that non-funded startups running out of money is like number 10 in terms of the reasons that they fail. So it seems inverted and it's strange. And one of the big reasons for that is because if you're like an entrepreneur and you're a bootstrap and you're doing it by the seat of your pants, I recommend books like Rework or The Lean Startup, which are really ways of incrementing, testing, and deploying your idea in smaller ways at the beginning without having to necessarily blow a whole bunch of money and time on something that perhaps somebody isn't going to want to buy. Another one, a good friend of mine wrote a book called Growth Hacker's Guide to the Galaxy. This is a great tactical book. It's like a little workshop book. Each page is its own little growth hack. This is a great book to read if you think you have a business idea, but you don't know if someone wants to buy it or if there's any value to it. These are great tactics and methods to test if you have a good product market fit, if there's an opportunity for you, if you can actually build a business around this that's going to generate enough money to sustain you and a team, and if it's scalable and if it's actually going to make an impact and have a dent on the world. And Extreme Revenue Growth is also a great book to check out. It's the gist of it is basically creating these sort of packaged, easily resellable units of things so that it can be infinitely scaled up and down depending on sort of the resources that you pour in for marketing and sales and operations and things like that. I've also learned there's a lot of ways to make money. How I thought I was going to start making money and how I was making money in the beginning when I started my company has ultimately turned out not to be the core and the future of what my company is becoming and is going to be. It was very much a project-based company. We do a video, we build a website for somebody. That's very feast or famine. There's a lot of risk there because what happens if you don't get a project this month or next month? How are you going to feed your team? How can you reliably grow and scale a company if you don't have reliable ways of generating revenue? So there's a lot of great tools for how to analyze what we call the business model. Business model canvas is a great tool. This is just a great visual to show you how you can, there's a bunch of types of methods and, activities and, relationships. There's a whole bunch of things that are involved in your business. And what's great about something like the business model canvas is that you can actually put them all in boxes, and then you can start moving them around, and you can see, oh, okay, if I sell this to this person in this way, and then I can offer, a monthly version of this, and they'll pay a monthly version of this, then that's a better way of making money than just say selling it once. And that's obviously a very simplified example. There's a great book, Built to Sell, by John Warlow. It really goes over a lot of what these business models are. And some of the best ones that he talks about are recurring revenue models, subscription type of models. And ultimately, that's one of the biggest successes that we've had. And I would argue is the reason that we're still in business. Because if we hadn't figured out how to create a recurring revenue stream, and it wasn't early enough on, if it was early enough on, I'd probably be on an island somewhere right now. But it was enough in time that it was able to generate a more stable business with more stable income. And then the projects components are just things that sort of fill in the gaps and allow us to generate our recurring revenue. But this book goes into detail about a lot of what these recurring revenue models and business models are, to really, I think, try and open your mind as to the infinite possibilities of things. There's so many ways, there's so much value that you can create. And there's so many reasons that people will pay you money for something that solves a problem for them that you may not even be thinking about, even if you are a labor entrepreneur. There's still a lot of things that people will still pay you money for in a recurring way. So this is a highly recommended book. And then a big lesson that I've learned is sales solves all problems. Now there's a lot of problems that aren't necessarily related to sales, like the operational problems, people problems that sales won't necessarily fix, but it's the idea that if you just keep selling, if you just keep bringing in money, and it will give you the revenue and the money that you need to solve those other problems. So, there's Ted Rogers, the founder of Rogers. He was very famous for being, even on to the day that he died, on his business card, he had the word, Ted Rogers, sales Rogers. Like, he considered himself a salesman. Some of the best, most successful business people that I know in my career, they're salespeople, and many of them don't even know how to do or make or manufacture the thing it is that they're selling, but they built a business around sales, and ultimately that's the thing that drives absolutely everything else. Obviously, some of these are the best sales books that you'll read. How to Win Friends and Influence People is, of course, the original core one, Dale Carnegie. But Little Red Book is good too. That was one that I actually carried around in my back pocket before I went into sales meetings. But I think one of the better ideas about sales is people buy you. People buy from people, and I've certainly experienced this, especially over the last 18 months. Is the world sort of blew up, as we all know. And I found really going back to relying on the, like me and my business partner, on really getting back in the field and doing our own sales and building those relationships with people and reminding our clients, we're still here, we're here to help you, we're going to help you through this. And that helps a lot. People buy the thing much less than they buy the person who's delivering the thing, because the person is the trust. It's the relationship that they have. It's the person that they can call in the middle of the night if something goes wrong. About branding. So we're a digital marketing agency. So branding is kind of a thing that we do. But really, when it comes down to it, your brand is your reputation and it's your promise. It's the thing that people know you for. That's really all it is. It's, fancy logos and catchphrases and slogans, all that stuff. Whatever, if you're a big Fortune 500 company, you can afford to pollute the marketplace with advertising. But ultimately, even as a small business, what people think of you as, that's what your brand is. So if you can get ahead of that and control what people think of you as, then you control your brand. Otherwise, someone else is going to control your brand, and you do not want that. A great way to do that is through storytelling and narratives and creating a compelling way for someone to think of you that connects with them emotionally. So emotional selling, people make decisions emotionally. Oftentimes they don't even remember what you said. They just remember how you made them feel. So if you can create an emotional story around why your business does what you do, how you do it, and the way that you're solving problems for people, and you can get people emotionally engaged in that becomes part of your brand. And then that makes it easier for them to refer you, to come back to buy from you again, and to feel good about what it is that you do. And that goes into the sort of why is often more important than the what. I'm sure in being in business, you probably heard of the great Simon Sinek TED Talk. This one right here with the golden circle, or why is in the middle, and talks about Apple and how Apple can make any product, any service, and they can sell it to anybody, because it's not really about the products and services that they make and sell. It's about why they do it, right? It's this disruption, this think differently. They can wrap an entire multiple ecosystem around this idea that anything that we do, we're going to do it differently and we're going to disrupt. That's not an advertisement for Apple. In fact, I actually don't necessarily like the company of Apple because some of the things they're doing lately. But it works from a branding and marketing perspective. And I definitely recommend the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek. Might even be one of the first ones that you read, to be honest with you. Customer service. This has been a big one for us. We have always been very heavily customer service focused. Many of our clients that we had from like back in the late 90s are still our clients to this day. And a big reason for that is that we paid a lot of attention to those relationships. We spent a lot of time with them. We helped them, solve a lot of problems over that journey. And we got them to the place where they feel really comfortable trusting us. And you can scale that. And there's a lot of great books on how to scale that. This one by Joey Coleman, who's a really good friend of mine, probably one of the best customer service books you'll ever read. Definitely recommend it. Never lose a customer again. It's also a greatest hits book that talks about some of the best things that other great companies like Zappos and them do. So it's a good one to read if you don't have time to read any other books. Hire and Train Great People. This one's sort of an obvious one. I recommend you get the book Who for how to do this. When I first read this book, I actually started taking this book in interviews with me to help guide me through the interview process. And it let me hire, a much better grade of person for our cultural fit for our organization. And all of that ultimately comes down to systemize, because you can have the greatest people, you can have the greatest sales, you can have the greatest everything. But if your company's flying around with paper documents and you don't have operations and systems in place and allowing everything to run smoothly, and where you can replicate, a whole bunch of things and sell them easily, then you're gonna hit a ceiling pretty quickly in terms of how fast you can scale, how much you can build, and really how much change you can make in the world. The two obviously best books or most well-known books for this are Scaling Up and Traction. Scaling Up is the modern version of Rockefeller Habits. Traction is a more tactical operations manual type of thing for businesses. But the one that I recommend is 40-Hour Work Year. Another good friend of mine, Scott Fritz. This is again another greatest hits book that takes some of the best ideas and condenses them into an actionable, like tactical, here's a workbook, here's how you build a decision matrix, here's how you make a decision around this, here's how you hire this kind of person. So if you don't have time to read the other two books, I would definitely go with this one first. And the thing I want to leave you with now is this idea of, okay, well, where do I get my business idea from? If I'm not going to be the person who, say I'm an accountant or say I'm a web designer, and I'm not going to just go make a web designing or an accounting company where I'm doing web designing and accounting for people, which is again, that technician, laborer, entrepreneur, where's my idea going to come from? And I think there's this huge myth in terms of where does innovation and where do business ideas and where does creativity come from? And ultimately what we found in our career is that it comes from remixing all the best stuff out there into your own version of it. And we've done this in our business. We've won, as Nick said, we've won a whole bunch of awards and a whole bunch of, fancy things. And we're sort of seen as this, unique, innovative company. But the secret is that we just stole really well in different unique ways and put them together in our own way. And then we make it work for our clients. So I definitely recommend you check out the documentary, Everything is a Remix by Kirby Ferguson, and Steal Like an Artist, which is a great one to help you possibly get over that hump that you might feel in terms of, I have to be original, I have to be unique, I have to solve a problem that no one solved. It's not necessarily true. You might solve a problem that someone else solved, but you can do a better job of solving it. That happens in a lot of companies. Look at, BlackBerry, right? Inventor of the mobile phone. No one's even used them anymore. It's often the first to be second or third or fourth that are the ones that end up becoming hugely successful. So don't necessarily be limited by this, it has to be perfect and I can't start until it is, because that can hold you back. Copy, transform, combine. That's a basic formula for creativity, for art, for innovation, and for business. And at the end, you can't do it alone. So find yourself a peer group, get yourself a partner. I have a business partner. I could not do this without him. We have a good Venn diagram where, he's one way, I'm one way. We overlap just enough that we can work together and not kill each other. But, I'm in entrepreneurs organization, peer-to-peer learning. I read tons of books. I go to tons of events. I meet tons of people. I need a huge amount of support, especially as an entrepreneur, because most people don't think like us. Most people don't function like us. And most people honestly don't want to put up with what we have to put up with in order to get to where we want to go. So getting yourself some support, being around like-minded people is probably one of the best things that you would ever do, even if you did nothing else. And that's my time, Curtis Priest. And I'm happy to take questions. My emails are on the screen. Feel free to reach out to me anytime you want, or Nick, you can send out this presentation and for the list of books and ideas that I put forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was great.
Pleasure.